This is the Untold American podcast, hosted by Dean and Jess. This is your go-to show for uncovering the fascinating, bizarre, and untold stories of American history and news. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of the stories you won't hear anywhere else. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Untold American, the show that digs into the hidden corners of our nation's past.
Exactly.
I'm Dean.
I'm Jess.
And today we're going deep into a period of intense social unrest and shocking violence.
Unbelievable.
The New York City Draft Riots of 1863.
Wow.
And these riots, these weren't just some minor historical footnote.
Yeah.
They were a full-blown uprising.
Oh, yeah.
That shook the city to its core.
Shook it up.
Imagine this.
Oh.
Federal troops.
Oh, wow.
Fresh from the Battle of Gettysburg.
Gettysburg?
Had to be called in to quell the unrest.
Unbelievable.
That's how bad things got.
Wow. So it's a...
Okay, so let's
set the scene.
Really dark.
Yes.
And fascinating chapter in American history.
Absolutely.
And one that offers a stark reminder of the powerful forces that can be unleashed when social and economic anxieties boil over.
That's right.
All right, let's set the scene.
Okay.
It's 1863. The Civil War is raging. President Lincoln has just issued the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right.
Now, on the surface, this was a landmark moment.
It was.
In the fight for freedom and equality.
Huge.
Huge. But it also ignited a firestorm of fear and resentment.
Oh, yeah.
Among certain segments of the population.
Of course.
Many white workers in New York City, already struggling to make ends meet,
Struggling.
saw the Emancipation Proclamation as a direct threat
Totally.
to their livelihoods.
Yeah.
They feared that newly freed slaves would flood the city, taking their jobs and driving down wages to make matters worse.
Oh, yeah.
Congress passes the Enrollment Act in March of 1863.
Okay.
Essentially instituting a draft for the first time in U.S. history.
For first time.
This new law required men between the ages of 20 and 45 to register for military service.
Right.
But there was a catch.
Always a catch.
If you had $300, you could buy your way out.
What?
Now you have to remember, for most working-class families at that time, $300 was a year's salary.
A year's salary.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
Oh, my gosh.
So you have this simmering pot of economic anxiety and resentment.
Right.
And then you throw in the fact that black men, who weren't even considered citizens at the time, were exempt from the draft.
Exempt.
Like a recipe for disaster, right?
Absolutely.
And the situation was further inflamed by a wave of sensationalist journalism.
Oh, yeah.
Newspapers, particularly those opposed to the war.
Right.
And Lincoln's administration published inflammatory articles about the draft law and the supposed threat of black migration to the city.
That's right.
Some even went so far as to claim that New York would be overrun by freed slaves.
Really?
Turning it into a black republic.
Wow.
It was a deliberate campaign of fear-mongering and misinformation. And it had a profound impact on public opinion.
Yeah.
This toxic mix
of
economic insecurity, racial prejudice, and propaganda created a tinderbox in New York City.
Just waiting.
Just waiting for a spark.
For a spark.
And that spark came in the form of the draft lottery.
Draft lottery.
Here's where things start to get really interesting.
Interesting.
And by interesting, I mean terrifying.
Okay.
The first draft lottery, held on July 11th, 1863, went off without a hitch.
Okay.
But the second lottery, just 2 days later, proved to be the tipping point.
The tipping point.
On July 13th, a mob fueled by anger and resentment, descended on the 9th District Draft Office at 3rd Avenue and 47th Street.
Wow.
In Midtown Manhattan. They started by throwing paving stones through the windows.
Okay.
But it quickly escalated into a full-blown riot.
Full-blown riot.
Now, this wasn't just a random act of vandalism.
Yeah, no.
The mob was organized and deliberate in their actions. They targeted symbols of authority and wealth, attacking police stations, government buildings, and even the homes of prominent citizens.
Wow.
They also took steps to hinder communication and slow down the response
Okay.
of authorities.
Oh.
They cut telegraph lines,
Okay.
sabotaged railroads,
Wow.
and even tried to set fire to the mayor's office.
The mayor's office.
It was a carefully orchestrated attempt to paralyze the city and sow chaos.
It sounds like it. And the New York State militia, which would have been the primary force for maintaining order, was away fighting at Gettysburg.
Oh, wow.
So this left the city incredibly vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
With only a small and under-equipped police force to confront this growing mob.
It's wild to think about, isn't it?
It is.
The city that never sleeps, brought to its knees by this wave of unrest. So how did the authorities respond?
Well, the New York Metropolitan Police Department, led by Superintendent John Kennedy, tried their best to contain the violence, but they were completely overwhelmed. Kennedy himself, a staunch unionist, was brutally attacked by the mob.
Oh, wow.
And reportedly suffered over 70 stab wounds.
70 stab wounds?
Yes.
That's just insane.
It's unbelievable.
It really shows you the level of rage and brutality that was unleashed during these riots.
Totally. It was a chaotic and terrifying scene.
Yeah.
The rioters, many of them armed with clubs, knives, and even firearms, rampaged through the city, looting stores, burning buildings, and attacking anyone who got in their way.
Jeez.
But what makes this story even more disturbing is that the violence quickly took on a horrifying racial dimension.
This is where it gets really dark. The mob's anger wasn't just directed at the government or the wealthy.
No.
It was also aimed at the city's black population.
That's right.
It's almost hard to believe that something like this could happen in America.
I know.
But it did.
Yeah.
And it's a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained racism and prejudice were, and sadly still are in our society.
Unfortunately, yes. It's a truly horrific chapter in American history. The mob targeted black neighborhoods, businesses and institutions. Homes were ransacked and burned.
Oh, my God.
Black men and women were beaten and lynched in the streets.
Wow.
It was a reign of terror, fueled by hatred and fear.
One of the most chilling examples of this racial violence was the attack on the colored orphan asylum.
Oh, gosh.
This asylum, which housed over 200 children,
200 children,
was looted and burned to the ground.
Oh, my gosh.
Can you imagine the terror those children must have felt?
I can't even imagine.
Seeing their home destroyed.
Yeah.
And their lives threatened by this angry mob.
It's just heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking to even think about.
I know.
And the violence didn't stop there.
No.
There are countless accounts of black men and women being dragged from their homes, tortured and murdered.
Wow.
The mob even attacked a black man who was trying to escape by swimming across the East River.
Wow.
Pelting him with rocks until he drowned.
Jeez.
It's almost like something out of a horror movie.
It really is.
It makes you wonder how people can be driven to such extremes of violence and cruelty.
Yeah, it's what causes that. There were several factors at play. One, of course, was the deep-seated racism that permeated American society at the time. Yeah. But it's important to remember that this racism was often intertwined with economic anxieties. Yeah. The rioters saw black people as competition for jobs and resources, and they used violence to assert their dominance and control.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And by fascinating, I mean horrifying.
Right.
How quickly the mob turned on its own neighbors. People they had lived alongside for years.
Yeah, and I think
what causes that?
The propaganda and misinformation spread by those anti-war newspapers had a lot to do with it.
Right.
They effectively demonized black people, painting them as a threat to white workers and the social order.
So how did this reign of terror finally end?
Well,
it couldn't have gone on forever, right?
Thankfully, no.
Yeah.
But it took days for federal troops to arrive and restore order.
Days.
Yes.
And remember, these were troops fresh from the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yes.
A battle that had seen some of the most horrific fighting of the entire Civil War.
Exactly.
The fact that they were needed to quell a civilian uprising in New York City speaks volumes about the severity of the situation.
It really does.
It must have been an incredible sight to see these battle-hardened soldiers marching through the streets of New York, trying to restore order in a city that had descended into chaos.
I bet. It was a turning point in the riots. the presence of federal troops, along with the efforts of some local militia units that had finally returned from the front lines, gradually began to push back the mob.
So what was the final toll of this horrific event?
Well, the official death toll was listed at 119.
119.
But some historians believe the actual number could be much higher.
Really?
Perhaps even reaching 1,200.
Wow. That's a staggering number.
It is.
And I imagine the property damage was immense as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was over 2,000 people were injured.
Wow.
And the property damage was estimated at over $1 million.
$1 million.
Which would be tens of millions of dollars in today's money.
Wow.
50 buildings, including churches, businesses, and that colored orphan asylum we talked about were burned to the ground.
The city must have been in ruins.
It was.
But beyond the physical damage, what were the lasting effects of these riots?
Well,
did they change New York City in any significant way?
Oh, they did. The most immediate impact was like a mass exodus of Black New Yorkers.
Wow.
Many just fled the city fearing for their lives.
Yeah.
And this displacement just permanently altered the city's demographics.
It's a tragic example of how violence and fear can just reshape communities.
Totally.
Forcing people from their homes and shattering that fabric of society.
Yeah, and the riots didn't just displace people.
Right.
They also deepened the existing racial and class divisions in the city.
Okay.
New York became even more segregated.
Right.
And white workers tightened their grip on certain industries, further marginalizing Black workers.
So the riots didn't just reflect these divisions.
No.
They actually exacerbated them.
They did.
Creating even deeper scars on the social landscape of the city.
But amid this darkness, there's also a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
The riots, in a strange and unintended way, helped galvanize the Black civil rights movement.
That's an interesting twist. How did that happen?
While facing such horrific violence and discrimination, Black New Yorkers were forced to organize and advocate for their rights more forcefully.
Right.
They realized that they couldn't rely on the government or the legal system to protect them. So they had to take matters into their own hands.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
The ability to find strength and purpose, even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
You said it.
And you see this in the aftermath of the riots, with Black community leaders and organizations stepping up to provide aid to victims.
Right.
Rebuild their lives and demand justice for the atrocities they had suffered.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, the seeds of progress can be sown.
The draft riots were a major turning point.
Huge.
In New York City's history. And their impact continues to reverberate today.
Oh, absolutely.
They expose the deep social and economic inequalities of the time.
Yes.
And set in motion changes that would continue to shape the city for decades to come.
That's right.
It's incredible how such a chaotic and destructive event could ultimately contribute to such significant shifts in the social fabric of a city.
History is rarely simple or straightforward.
Right.
And often even the most tragic events can have unintended consequences that ripple through time.
But in this case, it seems like a lot of the long-term effects were negative.
Yeah.
Did anything good come out of the riots besides the boost to civil rights activism?
Well, one positive outcome was that the government learned some valuable lessons about the importance of addressing socioeconomic disparities to prevent future unrest.
So they realized that just ignoring or suppressing these underlying tensions wouldn't work in the long run.
Exactly.
And this led to some reforms, albeit slow, often inadequate,
unfortunately,
aimed at improving the lives of working-class Americans.
That's right.
So in a way, the riots served as a wake-up call.
They did.
They forced the nation to confront the uncomfortable realities of inequality.
Yes.
And the potential for violence when those inequalities are ignored.
It's a lesson that unfortunately seems just as relevant today.
It is. We still struggle with many of the same issues.
Right.
Economic inequality, racial tensions, and political polarization.
It's sobering thought.
It makes you wonder if something like the New York City Draft Riots could happen again.
I know.
Maybe in a different form.
Of course.
But fueled by the same kind of anxieties and frustrations.
Absolutely.
Sobering thought.
It is.
And it underscores the importance of understanding our history.
Yes.
Not just as a collection of dates and events, but as a guide to navigating the challenges we face today.
Well said.
It seems that the New York City Draft Riots really were a microcosm of the larger forces at play in American society during that turbulent time.
Absolutely. And they continue to be a valuable lens through which to examine the complexities of our history and the enduring challenges we still face as a nation.
It's a reminder that even though the Civil War ended over 150 years ago, its legacy lives on in both visible and invisible ways. And the echoes of those events, particularly the draft riots, can be heard in the debates we're having today about racial justice.
That's right.
Economic inequality. And the role of government in addressing social ills.
It's a story that continues to challenge us, to make us question our assumptions, and to confront the darker aspects of our nation's past.
Well, this has been a truly eye-opening deep dive into one of the most turbulent periods in American history.
It has been.
It's amazing what we can learn from the past.
I know.
Even if it's sometimes painful to confront.
It's true. And I think the New York City Draft Riots offer a powerful reminder that the choices we make as individuals and as a society have consequences, both immediate and long-lasting.
And that we have a responsibility to learn from the mistakes of the past.
Absolutely.
So we can create a more just and equitable future for all Americans.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be thinking about this for a while.
Me too. It's a story that stays with you.
As always, I'm Dean.
And I'm Jess. Tune in next time for another deep dive into the untold stories of our nation's past.
This has been the Untold American Podcast with Dean and Jess. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed exploring these untold stories with us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with fellow history buffs and curious Mayas. Don't forget to leave a review. Your support helps us uncover even more fascinating stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep discovering America's untold tales.